Hi, this is Team That's a Nice Donkey with our Project Violence, as you can see in front of you. I am lead designer and producer, Tom Punter. I have with me...
Lead tech, Daniel Boland.
Character and weapons tech, Luke Oxer.
Lead character artist, Lauren Yeager-Knightley.
Excellent, let's get started. So, we have before us 3 game modes. We'll be talking about all of them in turn, but let's start with the main one, Bloodlocked. Where the player is locked at a time-limited amount of health. If you don't get a kill, you die. If you get a kill, it resets the timer. The other interesting factor that comes with this is if you get a kill with the same weapon 3 times in a row, it will reset your loadout and change it to a different one, resulting in the player having to forcibly change loadout whenever they get too many kills at once like that. So, first of all, weapons. Luke.
We have 6 weapons in the game, 3 melee and 3 ranged. For the 3 melee weapons, the left clicks are the same. They all have like a small swing. It's the right click that makes them unique. The sword has a wave attack, the axe has a thrown spinning attack, and the spear is also thrown, but with another right click can be teleported too. For the ranged weapons, we have the fire staff, the void staff, and the beam staff. For the fire staff, you've got a small fire projectile and a large fire projectile. The large fire projectile takes longer to fire and it has a larger AoE. The void staff has got a short range cone and a claw that can drag the enemies to the player. The beam staff has got 1 large charge up beam or 4 smaller beams. We also have the character movement system to make it easy to navigate the level. The character has a double jump and an automatic bolt system that means if you just about miss a jump, you'll be brought back up to the ledge to help easily traverse the level. I'll pass you on to Dan to do the enemies.
So for the enemies, there are 4 different enemies, not including the boss. The 4 enemies are the melee enemy. This will run up to the player and try and stab the player with its sword. There's also a ranged enemy, which will stand at a range and throw blood at the player, doing a certain amount of damage. There is also a flying enemy, which is the flying skull you would have seen, which will try and stay at a certain range between the player and itself, and then fly at the player and attack them. There is also the support enemy, which isn't on this game mode, but is on the other 2 game modes, where they will come in and they will try and shield the shield the other enemies that they are with. If those enemies all die, they will then run at the player and explode. The final enemy is the boss, which you're just about seeing now. The boss has 2 different phase shifts, where it can phase, and 2 different abilities. It also has different abilities where it can throw blood, it can summon swords that will spawn around that will damage the player, and it also can knock down the platforms that are around the boss arena. So it restricts the player's movement more and more as the boss fight goes on. I will pass you on to Lauren to talk about the characters.
Right, so the characters, we went with a sort of stylized low poly art style because we only had 2 artists for the entire game. Me being the only character artist, we wanted to keep it quite simple. Characters were quite repeatable. Like, we made the skeleton and the boss enemy. The skeleton's the generic enemy that I made some variations, like the wraith wearing the cloak and some props to kind of break up and make it a bit different. And then the boss, he's a bigger character, a bit more interesting, a bit more detail. And environment-wise, we went with a lot of modularity because we only had the 1 environment artist. Wanted to keep it nice and simple. A lot of assets we wanted to be able to be reused. We kept a very simple amount of materials so that we could reuse those, like smart materials we could duplicate, other materials that we could just apply to the sets to just keep repeating them to make it a lot less strenuous on our artists.
Another interesting talking point is how the main mode works. The player is introduced into the center platform, as you saw, and then has to traverse through 3 side arenas, completing each in turn and collecting the objective in the middle, which full heals the player, and increases the amount of damage they both deal and take. Then, at a final moment, the boss arena in the middle, as you saw, was unlocked. You drop down and then fight the boss. Past that, we have 2 other modes. The next one is Runner. Dan?
Runner is a constantly generating path for the player to run down. It will generate different heights for the player to use their movement system, and it will also generate the traps and the enemies from the previous modes. This is constantly going, so the player can go literally as far as they want to go until they end up dying from either the trap damage or the enemy damage. As you can see in front of the player, there is a blood fountain or blood particle effect being spewed out. Behind that is all the map constantly generating, and behind the player is a spike wall where if it hits the player, will kill the player. But also behind there is where the old map is getting destroyed, so the new map can get generated. This was a game mode that I came up with just because we didn't, as we've said, with the environment art, we didn't have many artists. So to reuse these assets made most sense, and to come up with something like the like this idea works well. As we said, there is also another game mode called Survival. I'll get to Survival later, though, when we show it off in a minute. The player, well, that's about it for this runner. So if Tom wants to go to the main menu, we can show the Survival mode. So survival mode is just your basic quick kind of mode where you're in a room and each wave gets slowly more and more enemies and the player must survive, and they get a score multiplier if they don't take damage. If they do take damage, they lose that multiplier, and that's pretty much it. It's a very simple kind of wave system, but it works.
Yeah, fair warning, the second game mode is not for those with a computer that is faint of heart, as the enemies can get numerous quite quickly. As you can see, my health is already plummeted. But yes, that concludes all of our game modes. Now, I will return to the main menu and continue looping footage of the main mode, while we can talk about overall each department's strengths and weaknesses. Personally, I feel as though design department did perfectly fine. In terms of strengths, mechanically speaking, the design is sound. I think what needs working on is perhaps level and environment design, not from an artistic perspective, but from a purely mechanical one. And yeah, so outside of planning more environments, it simply needs like more careful thought, I think, put into why each section is as it is and what needs to go in new sections as each play new things. Tech, would you like to talk about the ins and outs and strengths and weaknesses of Tech for me?
Yeah, I'll go first. So overall, I think the enemies have come out pretty well. Doing the flying enemy was definitely a new type of enemy for me, because it's more restricted through its movement and that. But overall, for the enemies and the game mode, I think they've come out fairly well. We managed to use everything that we were given. Like as a team, we used them pretty well. I think we could have expanded quite drastically if we had more environment artists and be able to make more levels, make this level bigger, make the other levels bigger, make the random generation better. But unfortunately we didn't, so we managed to work with what we got, and I think overall it's come out pretty well. Luke, do you want to talk about how weapons could be improved?
Yeah, the character I feel like is good. It's does everything needs to be for the level. As Dan said, the weapons is where we could really have improvement. I feel like the weapons are quite strong in their identity. They're pretty unique to each other, but the only thing that we really think to improve is potentially add more weapons. But again, the lower number of artists on our team meant that we kept it to 6 to make sure that it was obtainable in the time frame we were given. Speaking of art, I will pass you on to them now.
Right, so I think generally we did fairly well considering the number of people in our team. We did basically stick to the art style we were aiming for. We were going for Dust Dark Souls sort of thing, and I feel like it reflects that quite well. I think the characters do look quite interesting. They're kind of visually quite striking. The hearts on their chests are interesting to look at. I think, yes...
A stroke of genius in terms of game design, actually, from the art team, making them glow to help them stand out in some of the more poorly lit areas.
But yeah, I mean, as the guys have said, more characters would have been fantastic. We had initially planned to have another 2 or 3, or at least some variations, but unfortunately, time permitting and lack of team members. Regarding environment art, it turned out okay considering the kind of the scope of the level. There was a lot of modular efforts to make, so we did well considering that. I think in future just a bit more polishing, a little bit more attention to detail about tiling and things like that. I think that would have made it look a lot better. But yeah, I think it just a lot of polish and a little bit more added to it, and the art side would have made it look a lot more interesting and kind of broken a lot of the repetition up.
Most departments there did touch upon improvements for the future. Personally, I'd like to just work on more of everything, really. More mechanics, more characters, more things to design. As I said, my level design needs work, and frankly, the best way of figuring out how to improve that is working on it. But anyway, this has been Team That's a Nice Donkey with our project again. Violence, put it simply. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your watching, and yeah, have a nice day. Bye bye. Anybody else want to say bye? No, bye.
I think you did it well. I think you did it well.
I'm not allowed to say bye.
Okay.
You're not, you
All
upset
right.